What's up, guys? It's three-time NFL Pro Bowler, all-decade return specialist, Josh Cribbs. I want to welcome you to the College Sports Connection podcast, where Double A, Alex, and AJ host the Mid-American Conference best.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the College Sports Connection podcast. I'm your host, Alex the Captain. You know him, you love him. Joining me as always, AJ the Guru.
What's going on, everybody?
AJ, welcome back. We did not do any show last week because you and I were a little bit busy visiting a few MAC facilities.
Yeah, just a little bit. You know, we decided to take most of our content to the social media, and that's what we did. Myself and my brother actually went to Ball State last week for the Ball State Central Michigan game. It was a lot of fun. We got passes kind of like you did this week to Akron, so we were able to sit in the press box where it was nice and warm and dry while the fans sat outside in the pouring down rain. But yeah, we got to watch that game. That was a lot of fun. Ran into the commissioner of the league, John Steinbrecher. He sat behind us, got to talk to him for a little bit. But overall, it was a fun experience. We had to be in the field. They had a lot of recruits there, so it was kind of fun to get down and on the field next to those guys. We didn't get to talk to any coaches. Wanted to talk to Coach New for a little bit, but he scattered off. Obviously, he was a little busy. And same thing with McElwain, and kind of ran into him. I didn't get a chance to talk to him though. It was a lot of fun. We were able to have a good experience. Like I said, it was typical MACCG weather. It was cold. It was rainy. It was everything you thought it would be. But at the end of the day, we had a blast. Ball State didn't come out on top. Actually, the Chips came out on top, 37-17, I believe it was. Central Michigan moved the ball extremely well. You know, it's no secret that Pippleton and their running back Richardson is they're studs. Lou Nichols, that's right, Lou Nichols. Yeah. They're studs, and they showed why last week.
Well, and I think you look at the weather for that Ball State Central game. That weather was scripted for a ground game, and Lou Nichols is the nation's leading rusher in total rushing yards. So it's very, very clear and obvious that they were going to feed him the rock all night. And then when it starts pouring the way it does, Richardson doesn't have to do anything. Just keep handing it off, make the defense stop Lou Nichols. And it's clear at the end of the day that Ball State wasn't able to, but it looked like a lot of fun. Tell us about being down on the field during warmups. What was that like? Yeah,
it was pretty cool just to see the guys kind of get in the zone, get stretched out, get warmed up, kind of brought us back to the high school days of the pregame warmups and whatnot. I get the music playing and, just kind of getting warmed up. Seeing the size of I'd say lack of size actually kind of for Ball State up close. It was kind of interesting. My brother and I both made the comment that, we're bigger than some of these guys. And we really were, I thought. Ball State, I think, struggles there in the size department. But, they make up for it, though, with their speed on the outside. Johans Tyler, Jordan Hall, which he didn't actually play. I think he was a game-time decision. But then the freshman, Carson Steele, he's going to have a bright future ahead of him. The way he runs the ball, he runs downhill. He's not a side-to-side guy, and he always goes forward, it seems. And so, but yeah, it was great seeing those guys up close. Central Michigan went down to their warm-ups for a little bit. You could tell why they have a very serious running attack is because their offensive line, they're big, and their tight ends are big, and they have blocking, and they're able to create holes for Nichols and create protection for Richardson to get it to Pippleton, because at the end of the day, once you get in Pippleton's hands, it's kind of over. And that was a common theme last Wednesday, to say the least. Ball State just was not strong enough on the outside perimeter to stop the Chips. And then, that 37-17 score kind of shows why.
Sure. And you mentioned the weather already. You mentioned how rainy and pouring out it was. A little bit nice being in the press box away from all of that, getting to sit in a well-lit area with the climate control. I got to say, that's one thing I've started to notice. I'm really enjoying as these cold months creep in on us.
Yeah, no doubt. It's kind of funny you bring that up because I went to the Browns-Lions game this weekend in Cleveland, and it was raining, it was cold, it was windy, and I'm like, I am not made for this anymore. It's just not. I've done Buffalo in December, been there, done that, and I'm like, all right, it's time to retire to either warm games or getting seats in the box and covering them, because it's this cold stuff is not going to help much longer.
No, not at all. Not at all. Moving on to what I did on Saturday. So you took our midweek slate and you went to Ball State. I took our weekend slate and I went over to Akron, where Akron took on Kent State for the Battle of the Wagon Wheel. Our friend of the show, Graham Giles, went with us, or went with me rather, and we had a great time. We got there. It was a noon kickoff. So I know that you and I both done the night kickoffs with the late games for MACCG. This one was a noon kickoff, and this was interesting. We got there around 9 o'clock, and we get up, we set our stuff down, take the camera downstairs to snag some photos. And it was really interesting seeing they had like a breakfast layout for the media, just muffins, things like that. And then about halfway through the game, they had a chicken and beans and just whatever for the media, which I thought was really, really cool. I mean, they put out a great spread, all you could eat, as much as you wanted, however much you wanted. It was really, really nice.
Mm-hmm.
But it was cool getting there. And something I've noticed about each MAC facility that I've been to, and I don't know if you've noticed this too, is how easy it is to get to them, but also how much the fans in the parking lot, the ones who are there, are just ready to go. Like
Sure.
we walked around and we took some video and talked to some fans, and you guys can check that video out on our Twitter and our Instagram. But there, we just talked to fans and, hey, you guys excited? And it was really cool to see that these fans, these Akron fans specifically, were out at 9 a.m. cooking beans, cooking ravioli, cooking burgers, drinking beers, having their, alcohol, whiskeys, whatever. And they were just so hyped to be there for a college football game. And I thought that was a really, really cool sight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was one thing that was missing last Wednesday. No, there was hardly anybody there, and there was nobody in the tailgate field.
Mm-hmm.
We got Brady and I got parking passes,
Mm-hmm.
so we got to park up next to the stadiums. But being an alum, we drove and we know kind of where to go. We passed the parking lot, the tailgate field, and there was nobody there. It was just a cold, wet, damp Wednesday, but they did have food for us as well, which I did appreciate.
What did you guys have?
They had pizzas for us, and boxes of popcorn.
Hey, that works. That's food you didn't have to pay for in the stadium, right?
Exactly.
And it was but it was super cool, get on the field, do some pregame photos. And the staff at Akron, I was very impressed with how friendly that entire staff was to media personnel, media outlets, whatever. Just very helpful. Any questions we had, oh yeah, this is what you got to do here, whatever. So I went down. We were live tweeting the game from our Twitter account, which thank you guys for your interactions and all that. We really appreciate that. But I was live tweeting that game, putting random game information about the teams, about the players, whatever, all throughout the game. Around the third quarter, I went down and just got photos from on the field. And that was a lot of fun, just being down there. It almost felt illegal being down that close to the field while the game's happening.
Yeah, I agree.
So that was a lot of fun. Obviously, I did my stop at the bookstore, grabbed an Akron t-shirt, which now makes my collection 3 MAC schools, looking to add the additional 9 down the road. But I mean, all in all, it sounds like we both had a great time at our events. I did a quick pit stop afterwards with Graham to the old Akron Rubber Bowl, and we'll be throwing those photos up on Twitter for you guys. Talk about a sight to see. That stadium is derelict and decrepit, and wow, the history that has happened there, because that was the home for the Zips for 68 years.
Right.
Just absolutely falling apart. It was pretty wild to see.
Yeah, it looked like it. You sent me pictures, and it seemed like something you see in a horror movie.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it was cool knowing like what history has happened there, because they've had a lot of concerts, they've had a lot of different things have happened. And I didn't know this, and I don't know if you knew this, but they moved from the Rubber Bowl to the InfoCision Stadium on campus to start the 2009 season. But the Rubber Bowl actually was continued to be used for about 4 years after that for high school games, for whatever. And then the Rubber Bowl's actually only been closed for about 8 years now. I thought it'd been closed for about 12. No, it's only been about 8 years now.
The way it looks like it'd be closed that long.
Oh yeah. The field torn up. People have taken the letters, they've taken the midfield logo, they've taken numbers. from the turf that is still there, which is kind of odd. The stands, the bleachers are all gone. And I guess they started a demo project in 2015, I want to say, and they only got about 20% of it done, which included the end zone scoreboard and the end zone entrance and part of the home stands. But yeah, I mean, it was in pretty rough shape being there, and we didn't stay very long. But yeah, I've never seen anything like that in terms of a college football stadium. You always read about it like, hey, this stadium's abandoned, but it was really interesting to see. Did not know that it was actually part of the public works projects back in the late 30s during the Great Depression. One of those things to kind of get people back to work to, create things. And then when it opened in 1940, the Zips started using it.
Okay, interesting.
Right? You look at fun history.
You look at the pictures of it here. It seems like it's been closed for 30 years.
Sure.
And it's a shame because you look at the pictures of it in its heyday. It looked like it would have been a fun place to play.
Would have been a fun place to play. And Graham was telling me he played his high school rivalry game in the Rubber Bowl. And the Rubber Bowl when packed, housed about 40,000 people. So it was a pretty big stadium. Even, by today's MAC standards, it would still be the largest MAC stadium if it were still active, which I find absolutely incredible. But he was telling me, we used to play a rivalry game here against Hoban. It was Akron St. V versus Hoban, and they would play, and the fans were just insane. He said it got pretty intense, got pretty loud, but it was a pretty cool experience being a former high school football player, getting to play in a stadium like that.
Sure.
So Akron Rubber Bowl was great.
That. And then to see the change and the decrepidation of it all these years later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it was a neat stadium. Very glad to get the chance to go down to Akron and do the Zips game, but then also to get to see the Rubber Bowl. Great weekend overall.
Yeah, it sounds like we both had a lot of fun, it seems like.
Sure. So moving on into this week's games, we really only have one game of note in terms of meaning for MAC standing, but we do have a couple other games on tap, including one tonight that has bowl implications and bowl eligibility. So I'll let you start with Buffalo Ball State here, AJ.
Yeah, here in about 30 minutes or so, we'll have kickoff with Ball State Cardinals and the Buffalo Bulls. This is massive for Ball State. As we mentioned, they're sitting there at 5-6 on the year, and they have to win this to become bowl eligible. Mm-hmm. We beat Buffalo last year in the MAC championship. It's kind of interesting to see the fall of these two teams this year, coming off a shortened COVID year to a full season. Buffalo sitting here at 4-7, the Cards 5-6. Ball State's only 6-point favorites here, and Schumann here, like I said, in about a half hour. Drew Plitt comes into this game, senior, 220 for 334 yards, 2,072 yards passing, six touchdowns to only 5 picks. And Kyle Van Treese, his numbers are extremely down compared to what we thought they would be. You and I were extremely high on him at the beginning of the year, the way he came off of last season. But I think he's one of those quarterbacks you can look at and say he's been really hurt by the transfer portal. A lot of guys leaving him that he had on the squad last year. He's coming into this game 161 and 261 for 1,861 yards, 8 touchdowns, 6 picks. The running game, I think, is going to be really fun for this one here. Dylan McDuffie, the running back for the Buffalo Bills, 188 carries, 982 yards, 11 touchdowns. And the freshman sensation, Carson Steele, 552 yards. 152 carries. Getting ahead of myself here. 784 yards and 6 touchdowns. I think this is going to be – I saw on Twitter a little bit ago, the weather is cold down in Muncie. I can see them pounding the ball tonight. Jordan Hall, I'm not sure if he's playing. I'm sure he'll be a game-time decision. But he comes into the game with 59 receptions, 606 yards, 5 touchdowns, compared to Quan Williams, the leading receiver for Buffalo, 61 receptions, 805 yards, and 2 touchdowns. As I mentioned, the Ball State Cardinals are 6-point favorites, over under 5.5. I'm hammered under if I'm you. I don't see a ton of points being scored in this one, but 59.5 seems like a lot, and I don't think they hit that at all.
So I'm thinking 59.5, right? So that would require, let's just say, a 30-29 score line, right?
Yep.
If it's me, I think hammering the under on this one is probably a safe bet. But we've had games that we said hammer the under on 70-point lines, and they've tickled 100 points. So that's the beauty of MACCG, right? That's the beauty of the midweek games. That's what we love. The high scoring offenses, the slug it out, the defenses go and take a long dinner break, and let's see which offense can do more at the time. So I think it'll be interesting. Ball State's had such a weird season this year. You look at how they started off the year. They beat Western Illinois by a 10-point margin, lost at Penn State, lost at home to Wyoming, lost to Toledo at home. So they started out 1-3, ripped off 3 straight wins. And I mean, it looked like they were really, really in for a losing season by a big way after starting 1-3. They ripped off a big win against Army, ripped apart Western Michigan, and then down to Eastern Michigan, only to lose to Miami that rivalry game, beat Akron by 6 on a late fumble by Zach Gibson, the Akron quarterback, and then a 1-point loss at Northern Illinois, and then obviously the curious loss to Central Michigan. A few of these games go another direction. Miami, you could flip that score. That's another win. Northern Illinois, that's a 1-point game right there. That's not a bad loss, especially now that Northern Illinois is the now MAC West champions looking to fight for an 11-win season. There's a lot of good stuff here that Ball State can build off of. And you mentioned the young guys, Carson Steele being the new stud running back at Ball State. I think that they're going to be just fine. Bowl eligibility, if I am Coach Mike New, big thing. That is our focus right now. The one at a time has been their hashtag. But I think right now you have to buckle in. Let's focus. Let's go finish this season.
Definitely. I mean, you look at the Miami of Ohio game, Ball State had an opportunity to win it. They threw a pick in the end zone the last minute of that game.
Mm-hmm.
That's another win right there. If they had that, they'd be at 6 wins now.
Mm-hmm.
And they lost it in the last 2 seconds to Northern Illinois. That would be 7 wins right now. So like you mentioned, these two teams who are really, really competitive, they lost to. I mean, Miami of Ohio, they're sitting there at 4-4. But I think they're a lot better than what their record actually shows.
Mm-hmm.
They've played tough all year long. There's a couple of games here that could have gone either way for them. But when it comes to that entire West, I mean, you look at it, Miami of Ohio is sitting there at 6-5. They're bowl eligible. And if they win tonight or they win this week, they're probably going to win the MAC East, it looks like. It's between them and Kent State right now at the moment. I think Miami who has that tiebreaker?
That tiebreaker is decided on Saturday.
Oh, it is. That's right. It is on Saturday. Okay, never mind.
That is the de facto MAC East championship game, and I am psyched for that.
Absolutely. Kent State's only a 1-point favorite. That game is at Kent.
Mm-hmm.
So that should be really fun to watch. Is that a Saturday game or
that's a Saturday game at noon.
That's tonight. Is it?
No, Kent State Miami is Saturday.
Yep. That's right. I'm looking at the wrong one. So that should be a really fun, really interesting one. I can see that one being a highest scoring game too. 2 quarterbacks who are slinging the ball pretty well.
Sure.
And both teams have receivers who can get down the field quickly. You and I have been both high on Jack Sorensen this year.
Mm-hmm.
He's 1,209 yards, 65 receptions, 9 touchdowns. He's going to be a senior too, nevertheless. So he's going to be a guy who they're going to get the ball to, I think, early and often. Gabbert on the year, assuming he's going to still be the starter. He's only 20 of 24 for 207 yards, 2 touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's going to be a really fun game to watch.
Yeah, I'm excited for that one. And I mean, we can just go ahead and talk about that one right now. After watching what Kent State did last weekend to Akron. So I did a lot of pregame research to kind of throw some facts up and stuff. Kent State, when they score 38.7 points a game, they're undefeated this season.
Mm-hmm.
When Dustin Crum was their second leading rusher last week at 115 rushing yards, that it was so wild to see. We talked about how Akron would need to contain Dustin Crum and to prevent the rush defense or the rushing offense from doing anything. Kent State had 495 yards of total offense. 410 of them came on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
This is a dangerous rushing attack from Kent State. At the time, it was the 16th ranked rushing attack in the country, and I think the second highest in the MAC. This is a team who can score at will, and I got to see that this weekend. Dustin Crum looking absolutely electric with both his feet and his arm. He had 2 rushing tutties last week, And just, I mean, this is a team who's going to show up and score. This is going to be one that is going to be that I'm hammering the over on in a big way. 65.5 points on this game. Hammer the over if you are a betting man.
Yeah, I'd say so too. You look at the games this week, we can kind of just go down them a little bit. We talked about Miami, Kent State. We talked about Ball State and Buffalo. Another one tonight. This is going to be an interesting one. We talked about off air Western at Northern Illinois. Western, both these teams are bowl eligible. Western sitting there at 6-5. Northern Illinois sitting there at 8-3, having already clinched the MAC West. They're heading to Detroit in a couple of weeks. But WMU still is 6.5 point favorites, only because it sounds like Rocky Lombardi is sitting this one down to stay healthy and to get ready for the MAC championship.
So I think that's a smart move by Coach Hammock, right? You know, we want to talk about how they have transformed that Northern Illinois team, which, first off, mad props to Northern Illinois. 0-6 a year ago, turns it around, beats Georgia Tech to kick off the season, drops one game to Michigan where they just absolutely manhandle. But then they've just turned it around, and they've only lost 3 games all season, two non-conference, 1 in conference, and they've looked every bit as good as what we started to suspect about 6 weeks ago when you and I started talking about, Northern Illinois looks pretty good. Let's see what they do. They clinched the MAC West championship a week ago. So this game means nothing to them except for another win towards improving to a potential 11-win season. They could still, even if they lose this game this week, finish with a double-digit win total on their season, which is absolutely incredible when you think about last year. They were almost all freshmen on that roster and all young guys who just hadn't played. And now look at them. They're 1 win away from being MAC champions.
Yeah, this one's going to be fun because Western can put up points. I think they're going to tonight. I'm looking at the numbers here. Say over under 60 points. I think that's probably going to hit just because I do. You and I have been both high on Caleb Elby this year, Western's quarterback. He's done extremely well, and Western also has a 1,000-yard receiver and Sky Moore. Just over 1,000 yards.
I love Sky Moore. 1, that's a great name for a receiver, but 2, he's just a great receiver.
Absolutely. 79 receptions on the air, 1,050 yards, 6 touchdowns. He's averaging 13.3 yards per carry or per reception. That is. So he's going to be fun to watch. I think he's going to test Northern Illinois' defensive backs. We know they're tough. Northern Illinois' deep pass defense is nice, but this one could be fun to watch for sure.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think Northern Illinois, again, sitting 8-3, 6-1 in conference play. I think what has done them well this year, I mean, statistically, Western Michigan should beat the brakes off of Northern Illinois. That's the fact. You look at all the numbers, you look at what Ellaby's done, you look at what Sky Moore has done. I mean, just statistically speaking, Western Michigan should by and large run away with this game, but they should have ran away with this game against Ball State. They should have ran away with this game against Toledo, and they didn't. They should have ran away with this game against Eastern Michigan, and they didn't. So I think as we watch this game, we're going to see a couple of things happen. Either Western Michigan focuses in and finishes 7-5, or Northern Illinois comes out, dominates in a way that they probably shouldn't on their way to the MAC championship. This one is going to be a lot of fun either way.
Yeah, no doubt. And Coach Hammock running the program. He's done a fantastic job of turning that team around from going 0-6 last year to winning the MAC West and representing the West in Detroit. We're going to skip a few days. We go from Tuesday with the holidays here on Wednesday and Thursday. We're going to go to Friday, Eastern at Central. Both teams sitting there at 7-4. Central Michigan. This is surprising. Only 8.5 point favorites. I would have expected that to be a lot more the way Central Michigan's offense is running right now. Lou Nichols is the leading rusher in college football, 267 yards, 267 carries, 1,516 yards, 14 touchdowns on the year. And then you go to their quarterback, Daniel Richardson, who's slinging the rock extremely well. He's 161 and 258 for 2,294 yards, 21 touchdowns, 4 picks. And then who else? You have to talk about Pimpleton when you talk about Central Michigan. I mean, Kyle Pimpleton, excuse me. I saw him play live last week. The kid is electric. He can give him the ball get him the ball in open space. He can't be stopped, essentially. He has 54 receptions for 891 yards in the year, 4 touchdowns. I think that Central Michigan just kind of overpowers Eastern in this one.
I'm there with you. I think that this is a Central Michigan team who is clicking at the right time. And really, like, you look over the last month of college football, Central Michigan has just absolutely crushed their opponents, dating back to a 1-point loss against Northern Illinois. They dominated Western Michigan at Western Michigan 42-30. They manhandled Kent 52-30 or 54-30, beat Ball State last week 37-17. If you look at every game that this team has played, they really have one ugly conference loss, and that's at Miami 28-17. And then they have one really ugly non-conference loss, and that's the loss at LSU 49-21. Central Michigan is far better than their record indicates, and I'm actually really excited to see what they end up doing this week.
Yeah, absolutely. You talk about that non-conference schedule that Central Michigan had. Lost a fairly close one to Missouri at Missouri. They were in that game for a while, actually.
Yeah.
And, they went down to Florida, beat FIU, went down to Baton Rouge, down to Death Valley, competed there for a little bit, but ended up kind of losing that one late, 49-21. But then you go through their schedule here, put 54 points up on a good Kent State team, lost by 1 to Northern Illinois. They beat Toledo in overtime, barely hung on against against Ohio. And but beat the loss to Miami of Ohio there. But nevertheless, I think as the years gone on, Central Michigan has gotten better. Eastern has just looked inconsistent at times. I think, their defense I think is really suspect. That's why the playoff or the matchup predictor here has 62% to the Chips, 38 to the Eagles. I think that's fair, just because I think Eastern's defense is the weak link in this game.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, you look at what Eastern does, that defense is quite leaky, and obviously their offense can score at will, but that defense has had a really, really rough time stopping opponents. I mean, it's gotten the job done enough, but yeah, it's rough for them. So I think Central wins this game. I think that this is one that Central comes out, does what they need to do, improves to 8-4 on the season. Obviously no MAC championship in play, but finishing with a 9-win season, if they get a good bowl game and a favorable outcome there, that's nothing to season at if you're Jim McElwain.
Not at all. Not at all. I think this will be a fun one to watch.
Sure.
Down here to the kind of the bottom barrel of the conference this year, Ohio at BG. Both teams sit at 3-8. Ohio favored on the road by 6 points at BG. This one is going to be interesting to say the least. There's a lot of inconsistencies from both teams on both sides of the ball, I think. Start with Ohio. Curtis Rourke, 159 for 237 on the year for 1,714 yards, 11 touchdowns, 4 picks. A quarterback who kind of surprised us early on in the year, Matt McDonald from BG. He kind of came out strong, but I think he's kind of leveled off since then. On the year, he's 212 with 356 for exactly 2,300 yards, 11 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. I think the one thing that really hurts BG is their running attack. Their leading rusher, Tyrion Stewart, 61 carries, 395 yards on the year with 5 touchdowns. If anything's going to hold BG back from winning this game, I think it's going to be their rushing attack.
I think it's going to be their rushing attack, but you look at Ohio, all 3 of their wins come from within the Mid-American Conference.
Yeah.
They are sitting at 3-4 in conference play, 3-8 overall. The loss to Syracuse, was
where
brutal.
They were favored at.
Yeah, they were favored. That was brutal, but you can forgive that. The loss versus Duquesne, not forgivable. The loss to Louisiana Monroe, the Ragin' Cajuns, whatever. Losing at Northwestern. Okay, it sucks going 0-4 in non-conference play, but it happens. That's where we're at. They kicked off conference play really strong with a solid win against Akron, dropped 3 straight, but all 3 of those games that they lost, 1-score games. The loss to Central Michigan was a field goal. The loss at Buffalo was a point. The loss to Kent State by a touchdown. So I think that while Ohio has struggled in the first half of the year, they figured it out, and they started clicking. They started doing what they needed to do. The breaks don't go their way sometimes. They had a peculiar loss last week where Toledo is throttling them for a vast majority of that game, but then they snuck back in to try to make it interesting, but they still ended up losing by 2 scores. I think Ohio upsets the seniors on senior day at Bowling Green. This is going to be a fun one if you're a Bobcats fan. They're third in the MAC East.
They are, and that's weird to say too. You look at the MAC East or the standings there, but I do want to. This is from James Krause actually on Twitter. He is from the Northern Illinois Star. He has announced that Ethan Hampton will be starting for an NIU tonight. Rocky Lombardi is out due to injury, according to NIU Athletics. Okay. So it's official that Rocky Lombardi is not playing tonight. It sounds like he's hurt, getting it healthy for next week or 2 weeks rather. So it's probably smart on their end. But yes, back to the BG OU game. You look at the numbers here. BG as a whole, first downs 166 on the year, only rushing for 64 of those, 90 through the air. They're 33% on third down and 33% on fourth down. Look at that.
Yeah.
But rushing wise, they only have 1,134 yards rushing on the year. It's not great at all.
No.
And then you go over to OU here. OU deep Andre Tuggle. He's got 763 on the year, 7 touchdowns, averaging 5.9 yards a carry. I think he's the guy they're just going to feed the ball to, especially being a senior. His last regular season game and his last game actually as a Bobcat. They're not going bowling. So I think this is a game where they're just going to hand it off, let him do his thing, kind of let him expose the front seven of BG, and I think the Bobcats come away with a win to end the season of 4-8.
Yeah, I think so. I think Bowling Green, I think they go back to the drawing board in the offseason. Obviously, marked improvements over a season ago, including wins over Minnesota. That was obviously big for them, but big for the conference as well. I just think that Bowling Green doesn't have it. I think Ohio comes out, wins this game, gets out of Doit Perry Stadium with a W, 4-8 in their first season away from the coaching change. And I think that this is exactly what you want if you're a Bobcat. You understand that there was a coaching change. You understand the nature of the twists and turns that come with that. Now you got something to build on, gives you momentum going into the offseason, gives you momentum going into next season. Ohio comes away with this one.
Yeah, I think so too. You mentioned the coaching change there. That happened just a couple of days before the season really started, a couple of weeks. It was a couple of days before media day.
Yeah, I think it was like 2 days before media day.
2 days, if that, yeah. And so I think this is going to be a massive learning curve for OU. I think this is an opportunity to kind of, like I said, adjust if they have to. Gives the coaching staff an entire year to gel and work together, get these guys right for next season. Because at the end of the day, OU is still always going to be in the conversation for the MAC. They always have been, they always will be. They're just kind of one of those teams that kind of linger and hang out there. And obviously, that's not the case so much this year. But given the circumstances, I think they'll just be fine going forward.
Yeah, I think so. Moving into the last game of the weekend, we already talked Miami versus Kent State. That one's going to be a lot of fun. I think that Kent State will represent the East in the MAC championship, but who knows? This one's going to be a lot of fun. But moving into the last game of the regular season, Akron at Toledo. Toledo is playing a game where they are trying to improve their bowl resume to finish with 7 wins, 5 losses. Akron, they're playing for nothing. They have no coach who's being retained, and they're playing for maybe 3 wins, which isn't good enough to get them to a bowl game. So Akron playing for nothing, Toledo playing for a lot. These games are tricky.
Absolutely.
Looking at the scores from this season for both teams, though, Toledo, obviously a very prohibitive favorite in this game.
Yeah, Toledo talked about Toledo here. They're 28.5-point favorites playing at home on senior day. Akron, they're struggling to find their feet right now. They've actually been in a couple of games this year. They were in that Ball State one. They lost by 5 to Western in the last minute there. That kind of got blown out last week against Kent State, were just kind of to be expected. But you look at Toledo, we've talked about them early on in the year. They've been really inconsistent when it comes to penalties. They have to, by this point, lead the country in penalties, it seems like.
Yeah. It's been rough.
It's been rough there. And it's very interesting, too. That doesn't really usually happen, to say the least. But they've had not almost 1,000 yards of penalties this year. They've had 108 penalties for 993 yards. They average 90 yards of penalties per game. That's not going to be enough to deter Akron and for Akron to pull this one out. But nevertheless, That's something that it's not normal for a Toledo program. You look at Daquan Finn. He's having a fantastic year, almost under 1,600 yards. Koback, 1,100 yards. I think Toledo's moving the ball extremely well, and they'll obviously be enough and too much for Akron this week.
So I wanted to point out an interesting stat. Toledo, it ranks 129 out of 130 in fewest penalties per game. They are averaging 9.6 penalties per game this season, which is that's rough.
That's rough. Yeah, not great.
Eastern Michigan leads the country in fewest penalties at 3.4 per game. So that's a fun little fact for you. That's which kind of makes sense after watching that Eastern versus Toledo game a couple weeks ago, that right. Eastern Michigan was so good in that game and found a way to win. Toledo killing themselves with penalties, and that's been their tale this season. They had an opportunity to beat Notre Dame, and frankly, they did beat Notre Dame until they started getting themselves penalized. Every game that they've lost this year, save Colorado State, has been a one-score game where they've lost because of penalties. So Coach Candle has to figure out how to get these guys disciplined, how to get them refocused. This has been a perpetual problem for Toledo for years. Last year, they averaged 10.7 penalties per game. It's a little bit better this year, but yeah, you can't keep doing that. I mean, and like I said, that's been a problem for Coach Candle every year. 2 years ago, it was 12. 3 years ago, it was 10.3. Like it's a consistent Toledo problem. And that's rough.
Yeah, it really is.
So, but I think you're right. I think Toledo wins this one pretty handily. It's, the last game for the seniors in the Glass Bowl before hopefully finding out a bowl game destination. Should be a good one. Daquan Finn is going to be absolutely electric for Toledo for years to come. He's only a freshman. He's a redshirt freshman. So last year didn't even count for him. So he'll be playing at Toledo for 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
So this kid is one who's going to be absolutely electric. Matt Landers, the wide receiver from Georgia, looking phenomenal, coming out, playing some great ball, finally meeting his billing as a big, strong physical receiver. Akron had some flashes of brilliance. They could move the ball against Kent State. They just couldn't finish things. Again, fumbles or incompletions or not being able to move the ball enough. It just, whatever it may be, Akron really struggled. Toledo wins this one pretty quickly, pretty heavily in the first half. Give your seniors who don't get to play much a chance in the second half to go out and play. Toledo finishes 7-5.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the case too. Akron, they've got a lot of work, lots to work on here this offseason. That starts with finding a head coach. We talked off air about who we think that may be. That's something we'll get into here as we get into the offseason, because that could be a really fun debate. There's a lot of high quality candidates out there when it comes to assistant coaches and whatnot from higher levels. I can definitely see somebody taking the bait and going to Akron and try to turn that program around.
Sure.
What's 7 o'clock, man? We've got MACCG on.
We've got MACCG on. So let's wrap this up, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. We really appreciate it. I know that AJ and I are excited to do our preview show next week for the MAC championship. And then we will be doing live coverage from Detroit. We've got a photographer on the field. We are excited to be back. Big thanks to Jeremy Guy for helping make that happen for us to get back to Detroit to do more coverage, this time with fans. I'm excited for that.
Yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be different, but nevertheless, it'll be cool.
Yeah, definitely different. But guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Continue to check us out on social media. We just did a facelift on the website. Looks great. Things are a lot easier to find, a lot quicker to find. The Twitter, we are blowing up on Twitter. Y'all better hop on the train now while we can still say, hey, we remember you when you were under 1,000 followers. Better hop on that train quick, because we're surprisingly closing in on that 1,000 follower mark pretty quickly. We were just at 900, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
So yeah, guys, check us out at College Sport Pod. AJ, did you have anything else you wanted to throw out there, man?
I don't. I know next week will be fun because we'll get to preview the MAC championship, but we're also going to be there, so that's going to be a lot of fun. It's a noon game on a Saturday. Unlike last year, it was prime time on a Friday. Mm-hmm. And so nevertheless, it'll be fun to get out there and get to talk that. And we'll also recap this week's games as well with a couple of games with high stakes.
Sure. It'll be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it. Guys, thanks so much for tuning in. And we will see you next week.
See you.